Welcome to the Haunted Hacker Podcast, episode June, volume 3. Usually I do one a week. This week I've done 3, so we're cruising right along. News for the Haunted Hacker Podcast: business as usual. Things are going great. We have a retired Navy commander coming on in a couple weeks to talk about nation-state security and national security. A lot of things going on as far as Hackers for Vets, the charity, the nonprofit that we started, and the Beard Shave charity that's coming up in November with Matt Lee and the good folks at Richardson at IT Innovation Conference. So in November, this beautiful beard will disappear if we hit $300,000, and that money will go to multiple charities, and one of them being Hackers for Vets, where I started the charity, the nonprofit, to help veterans transition into cybersecurity without having to worry about the monetary issues and navigation. So the money will go to helping them get certifications, laptops, equipment, whatever they need to make a very smooth transition. So without further ado, I'll introduce Nato. And he has a very interesting background, a very entrepreneurial spirit, like myself. And just a fascinating person. I learned about him through other people and started following his content, and I was really impressed. So, Nato, tell us about yourself and tell us how you got into cyber and what you're doing and what your passions are.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. So I come from sort of just like a very kind of DIY background. Like I was one of those people who just like as a kid was messing around with stuff. I learned technology starting really with like the old school Macs, but then I started getting in trouble when I got a Dreamcast, because Dreamcast has a Windows-based operating system on it, and you could plug in a little keyboard and get on a browser. And I wanted to play Phantasy Star Online, and I wanted to play so badly, but it was like it required dial-up, and we didn't have a dial-up connection. So I like as a kid, I like found out that you could get these codes and then use that to get minutes to play this game online. And little did I know at the time, because I was just a kid, I was actually just like taking people's like paid minutes for their dial-up, and then the next thing you know, it's like you get into some trouble doing some things. But eventually I started working to like sell cell phones like out in the middle of like nowhere. I was like way out in like the mountains where it's like the closest city was maybe like 4 hours away from me.
Nice.
And there was like no one who knew anything about technology out there. They're like, hey, you know how to use computers? I was like, yeah, but I don't do computer work. They're like, but you want to do computer? I was like, no. And then like about a few months later, they came back and they're like, well, the cell phone contract is ending, so either we're gonna have to fire you, or we do have computer roles available if you want to work with computers because we think you'd be good at it. I was like, well, I don't want to lose my job. That's actually the only reason I ended up in cybersecurity. And so I started working on it, and they had me like refurbishing computers. I was like setting up like satellite arrays on like ranches and stuff like that. So that I started with like working on like the malware for the ranchers, getting their satellite connections going, and like stuff out in like very strange kind of extreme regions. And then it was also the middle of like the 2008 times when I was really trying to figure stuff out. And so you kind of just take the work you can get. And like other people, I think that there's like this like glamorous idea of like working in a technology job. I was making like minimum wage. I didn't even know that malware analysis was valuable. I was like, oh, this is what minimum wage paid. Like, this is what you do at minimum wage. It's like you do malware analysis.
Nice.
It was because I didn't even know what it was. I was like, oh, I should find better paying work.
Right.
So I like went back to the city, and I couldn't find better paying work. The stuff that all paid something that was reasonable was the stuff that I was originally getting paid minimum wage for. So then I started working like data centers, and everyone was scared of the data centers. And the only reason I started getting into data center work is because other people were like, oh, that sounds hard. I don't want to do that. They're like, hey, do you want to do it? I was like, I don't know. I've refurbished some computers. That's probably good enough, right? And they're like, yeah, that sounds good. And they just like send me out there.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah. So starting out and like as a kid, we definitely have that in common, because one of the first things I did in technology was learn how to build little RF phone taps that go onto landlines,
Yeah.
and then they broadcast the conversation via FM signal. So we have sort of the same spirit when it comes to that. So I've looked at some of the stuff that you're doing now, and so one of the things that I really wanted to dive into about your background is Cloud Underground. Tell me about Cloud Underground, the idea behind it, what you're doing with it, just kind of the whole concept of Cloud Underground.
So Cloud Underground is probably, it sounded crazy before we started it, but it worked. So I had originally started a company called H4unt3d, which before that was called like data design. And I was like, I'm going to go try to work in cybersecurity and like help educate people and all these things. And what I came to find is like, you can tell people the stuff that'll help them get like right into a job, and they won't listen to that. Instead, they'll follow the sexy marketing, right, and then come back and say, well, I can't get a job. I'm like, I have a direct path that'll tell you how to get there. And they're like, well, but I was told I need to go get these certifications. And so I was like, how about I just let that company run with AI? Because I love AI. It's like a hobby of mine, to the point to where I like use it for if there's some way that I can apply AI, I'm going to do it. So I was like, well, I wonder if I could just like let AI run that company. And so I configured this like AI pipeline using like a number of things. It uses, I don't know if anyone knows like how like data arbitrage works. But it's similar to like where's another place where we see arbitrage is like the stock market, like buying and selling trades. Well, you can do similar things with like, let's say that you don't want to host machine learning infrastructure, but you can figure out how to generate like a little bit of cash flow off of something like an application or a product you're flipping or something. You can arbitrage like data sets from like Facebook and from Google and from LinkedIn. And then you can like choose where to like send like what's called like insight tagging over to different things. So I was like, oh, I bet I could just like have AI run the whole company while I go and start a company that solves the other problems that I have with the H4unt3d company, which was it was hard to figure out margins because I needed like lower cost infrastructure. Right. I was like, oh, I know, I'll just talk to some of my top customers and then see if they want to go build some infrastructure. And so that turned into like Randall and like Zach has been on here, who's one too. And they're all like, that sounds like a great idea. Why not? So we were like, we were teaching cybersecurity. So we need a cloud now. So why don't we teach cloud by just building like the infrastructure, and then we can just make it available for the people. And if we make enough money, we can make it free. So we started charging like $150 a month to like sign people up to the dojo. And we're like, come on, we're just going to build a cloud. Let's go. And then we got enough interest, and we got like research partner and stuff like that, and started getting like some deals and some people who wanted to kind of like support our path. And then like Ken was a big part of that. If anyone's heard of like Ken Underhill. And so then we're just like, all right, I guess we're just going to keep going with it. And then after it took about like a little over a year, we actually completed this thing. It's called like a hyper-converged data center. And I was like, all right, well, we taught people how to build cloud by just building one. So why don't we next like just start letting people use it to like, well, now we can teach you how to make a living with the skills, because it's one thing to have skills and it's another thing to know how to make money with your skills. Yep. Because my whole thought is like, why don't we get people to stop being broke for no reason when there's like ways to just do stuff? So it's like, well, I'll just give you the cloud, because normally one of the reasons why people have trouble starting companies, and the same challenge at H4unt3d, is like infrastructure costs so much, or you need like people to develop these things. I was like, well, I don't want to have to do this over again, ever again. And if I go work somewhere else, I don't want to do it over again, ever again, or like tell someone how to do all those things anymore, because I've gotten to the point where I'm sick of teaching it. How do you not teach something you never want to teach or do again? Make it free for everyone. Don't put licenses on it. Don't put stuff on it that says that you terms and take all that away. Take it away and just throw it out there and destroy the market with it, because people are going to panic. And then you start getting like the competitors start popping up, and they're like, well, you can't do that. I'm like, I can't do what? They're like, you can't just like, there's no such thing as like a copy paste data center. That's a dumb idea. I'm like, well, no one invested in me before I was a threat, so I don't really care about your bottom lines. Right. So this is where we're at. And so now a lot of companies like they depend, and rely on like selling things that might be similar to that, and they charge like $120,000 a year. I'm like, why don't we just take the thing that normally costs $120,000 a year, just make it free? So then all those products no longer hold much relevance in the market, and now it's just a matter of time for people to discover it. And I'm just curious to see what happens. So, because I could have otherwise continued to try to fund it and license it and try to make money off it that way. I'm like, why don't we put the money on the people? So it's like, if the money is to pay people and labor anyways, then just charge more for the labor. So we charge a lot for the labor because it's talent that can fabricate whatever you can imagine, versus just like, can you complete the Security Plus?
Right.
Pay someone $130,000, you can complete a Security Plus, or you can pay people who can just like fabricate an entire cloud just because they know how. And so to me, I'm like, that's who I want to work with.
Yeah, exactly. In the industry with certifications, man, that's one thing I've fought for so long, is that certifications are such a false standard to go by, because it's such a snapshot in time, a very small set of data or information to consume and test on. And the next day, guess what? New vulnerabilities and new tactics and techniques come out. So really, what is that certification worth? Other than the $5,000 you charge some kid fresh out of college who can't afford it to take the test. So I try to avoid that. And one of my things that I do when hiring people for my MDR is that I don't look at certifications necessarily. I look at how they think and how they problem solve and the creativity, because I think the creativity in this industry is important. I can teach anybody how to look at a platform and alert something, but I can't teach them how to be creative and how to use their mind to go from that point to another point. So I really value your opinion on those certifications, because I think that the certification industry, which is what they become, is a poison.
I think so. It's because you get these folks who think that they need to get these certifications before getting a job. The first technical job that I got, like, I guess that wasn't paying me minimum wage, they said that I needed a certification, but they hired me before getting it, and then they also paid for it. And I failed the cert while working there and getting paid I don't know how many times until I passed it. And then I see these people trying to get these certifications before getting the job, and it's hard for me to wrap my head around, like, you're going to end up being broke for a year, maybe 2 or 3 years or 4 years, trying to feel like maybe one day you can apply to a job. Like, I can't even recommend it. It doesn't make any sense.
You know what? My first certification, besides the CEH, I went and challenged that, took it because my company is paying for it. So it's free.
Yeah.
But the next certification that I challenged was back, I believe it was 2008, and it was SAN certifications. And back then they had where you could challenge the certification test, pay $300 or $400, which wasn't much because they didn't expect you to pass. They wanted you to take the boot camp, but they also did the testing online without proctors. So I went and challenged 3 of their exams in one day and passed them all. And they put me on an audit committee to check and see if I cheated. And I'm like, no, your exams just really suck. So certifications have come in ways, but they still suck. So, and I think that, training and being able to be exposed to the technology and processes, I think that's where the true knowledge comes from. It's not taking a test, really.
I agree, because it's like every single student that I've had that succeeded. So like when I built the Pied Hacker experience, that's how I met like everyone who made what like turned into Cloud Underground possible. I made this like package and program called I got this idea because I was reading a bunch of articles and blogs, and it was like, how did Bezos find his co-founders? Because I had just burned through co-founders like no tomorrow. I think I burned through like 7 co-founders. I apologize to people who think that this is a distasteful opinion, but I think that firing is maybe one of the most valuable things in business. I think the better you are at firing, you'll find significantly more success in life. And I am not opposed to being fired. Let me be blunt about that too. I've been fired. I've had people who disagree with me. I've been part of big layoffs. I've also been a part of causing big layoffs. I've been on all sides of all things. And to me, I just see it as like, it's business, I guess. I don't know. It's one of those
natural
things.
Progression.
Yeah. So like Bezos, how did he find, or at least, I don't know if this is true or if it's just what that blog was saying at the time. because sometimes people say things that aren't true in blogs, but they're like, oh, he hired his best customers. I was like, oh, hiring the best customers.
Doesn't that
So
make sense?
it made too much sense. And I was consulting mostly with Notia Point, but I was like, well, what if I stop consulting and shift to more of a product focus and make the product to be to like identify the kinds of people who I wish I knew, to like who I'd work with, which usually means you have to like put people through a series of very specific tests to identify them. And so I created the Pied Hacker experience, and because I'm a gamer, I love video games. I'm not going to even pretend like I don't. I'm obviously. It's like it's like games that they'll have like an easy mode and an in between, like intermediate. And you got like the hard mode. Right. And then I really like games like have you ever played like Dark Souls or Elden Ring?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah, I love those games, and they like they're just hard games.
Yeah.
So I made a mode called Hope for the Hardcore, because I was like, I hope that I find more hardcore, is what was in my head when I labeled it that. Because it's kind of like in my own head, like hope for me to find more people who are a little more hardcore than just like, I just am here to complete this thing, and then I'm going to go apply to 4,000 job applications till I get one. One person kept a spreadsheet, took him 4,000 something. I think it was like 4,002 job applications before landing one. I'm like, nope, not going to do that. I was not my audience. So I was like, how do I find the more hardcore types? So I made that, and lo and behold, like what it pushed people into is not just build your own technology, but try to also make a living with your own technology.
Right.
And then I was like, I'm going to find the perfect intern who's going to make that possible. And I just remember I was looking around, and because LinkedIn's filled with all these people who are certain ways, and there was someone named Christina, and I was like, who's Christina? And Christina had blue hair. And then I started talking, and lo and behold, it wasn't actually Christina, that was Zach. And then I was like, I need an intern, and you're the person who is perfect for exactly what I'm looking for, because you just did something half crazy, and I need someone like you. And so he became the intern for that. And you always kind of hope that these things might work the way that they did. But not only did he make his own technology from what he learned with that, he went and started making companies started making his own living. And so I helped him start getting some early deals so he could get some cash cycling around. Then he took that money and started making, because that's what you hope people do, is like, okay, look, I don't need to give you too much money, just enough to get going. And will you make something of it? Will you? And right. He did. And that's what you hope to find. And then I also found Randall, who's part of the Cloud Underground team. And for me, I'm not that person who thinks that people should necessarily work together directly. I like, you can either be a partner or work with me. I don't really care. However people want to work with me, I just see it as like, we're just making some things happen. And right. if we're getting paid and we're eating and we're feeding our families and growing and doing some cool stuff, hey. So Randall joined more directly, and he's like, okay, so he was a big part of like the day-to-day process for building out a lot of the other things. And then Zach too, there's a lot of people who are involved. Then you just get into like the dojo from its journey from like 0 members to like 100 members. And probably like the first 10 members created all of the concepts that I collected. And then the few folks of us who did more of the engineering built what's called a hyper-converged data center. And that's what the Underground Nexus is. Copy paste data center.
That's pretty badass. So when I was talking to Zach, when I interviewed him, and talking to Santiago and learning about what they had going on, the copy and paste data center, that's pretty fucking amazing. And, just the concept alone, not even the operation, but in the production, but just the concept, I think is foreign to a lot of people, because we're all used to the constructs that are here now. And the way things have always been done, and the way that the industry does it. But I like that you guys actually step outside the box and like look at things from a visionary standpoint and say, hey, look, I know that you're doing your thing this way, and that's great, because I'm not here to impede that, but I'm doing shit my own way. And I think that takes, first of all, it takes a strong person. It takes someone very intelligent, and like you have the entrepreneurial spirit to actually go out and make that shit work. And I totally get what you're saying about giving money to somebody and really hoping that something comes out of it. But it looks like you've been really successful with
So it's a weird process. I'd say it's partly luck because it depends on who you run into. But I also see it as you can increase the frequency of luck with numbers too.
that. Yes. Yes. So, and I did hear about the proving grounds, where they can go on to the platform and actually test your skills, and not many people make it through it. And I think that's pretty awesome because, up until now, we've had OSCP that gave that kind of proof that you can do what you do, until they got, pre-smashed and all the answers to the test leaked and had to reform. But still, that concept, I think, is the winning concept when it comes to finding people, right? So back in about 2006, that was my idea. I was running a pen test team for a company called NEC Unified. And I was having such a hard time finding people back then who knew how to pen test and were proficient at it. It wasn't very new, but again, it wasn't very old either. And what I did was I just grabbed VirtualBox and a bunch of VMs, that were vulnerable, and threw them on there. And that was the test. That was the interview. I don't want to know about certifications. I don't want to know about your education. I want to see how your mind works. And to me, psychology and behavior analysis and stuff like that has always been kind of a hobby of mine. And I think that stems from the neurodiversity that I have. And so throwing that together and watching how they work as they're doing it, that proves a lot. And I think that you're definitely spot on when it comes to that. I think that's really cool.
It's interesting because I think I get these folks, because I get a lot of people tell me that the things that I do either aren't possible or that especially before I do them. I'll have this thing where after I complete something that people told me isn't possible, then all of a sudden I lose a whole bunch of followers every single time. And then I gain more every time from all these people who are like, what? Whoa, that's possible. And then I get this wave of people. Because if someone's going to hate on me, I'm not going to block you. I'm going to make you watch if you're willing. And if you want to watch, I'll give you a show too. I'll even make it like a magic show, and I'll come up with some tricks if I can. But it's if you can get into that, into the other person's mind a little bit and kind of find ways to build experiences that let you observe what people are doing. And one of the ways that I do it is, how did we make the copy paste data center like a copy paste data center? Because people wonder sometimes well, how is that possible? So it's done with Git, which is, even though it's version management, one of the nice things about Git is I really don't particularly care for licensing things like that, but it also automatically you have copyright right there because you have some stuff that's written down, and that's got a protection of its own in case someone tries to be oh, I invented this and I'm going to make it impossible for people to do, and then now everyone has to pay for it and it's no longer free. So to prevent that sort of thing, Git lets me have that copyright in case someone tries to basically take down the structure or try to claim that I copied their structure, something stupid. But since it's all written down too, that means that that's all the configurations. They're right there. And whenever you go and start running the little container program for the underground nexus, it just goes back and then reads all of those instructions basically from all of its the Git structure. So, yeah, I used to build well, not used to, I build systems in general, but when I got into refurbishing, I would build receivers, I would build gaming computers, and I just whatever thing. But you get a motherboard that has inputs and outputs in a BIOS system. So I took the functions of BIOS and put it in Git and basically made Git the BIOS. And that's how it works.
That's pretty badass. And when I learned about the structure, I thought, how genius is that? Using Git in order to deploy data centers, that's pretty badass. But going back to your comment about losing followers and gaining followers, what I found in the industry right now, the temperament and the pulse on the industry, from my perception, is that a lot of people in the industry are tired of hearing the same old shit over and over again. And it's the same buzzwords, it's the same marketing bullshit. People really want to hear something unique and something new. But the caveat to that, and the catch-22 to that, is they want to hear something new and they want to see something phenomenal out of the box that nobody has done before. But then again, the whole industry starts to question, is it true? Is it real? Does it really work? Is this bullshit? And then you get the naysayers who, do their thing to disrupt, and it's just a pain in the ass. But what I found is, if you're genuine and you really have something unique, which you do, followers come and go, but they'll always be there. You know what I'm saying?
Fair enough. It is it's definitely one of those things. It's funny watching like other people who I mentor too, because it's like you go through it for yourself, and then after a while, and you start like having other folks who are like going out there and like putting things into practice, then you'll like see them going through their experience, and then like everyone gets hit with that, like their first hater, and then it's like that first month of getting like online hate, people just like, even some of the like people just like are like, what is this? What do I do?
Freak out. Yep.
Yeah.
I did the same thing. A lot of people know about what happened to me last year, and I had a shit ton of haters. But what a valuable lesson that I learned, and I'm not very good at social cues or understanding social concepts a lot of the time. But what somebody told me that really stuck with me is that when you get haters, you're doing something right. No matter if they're talking about you in a positive way or a negative way, they're still talking. And I think that's important, and there's always going to be haters. There's always going to be people who don't want to allow people to be not mainstream. Oh, you're in cybersecurity, you need to think this way, you need to act this way, you need to look this way, and you need to operate this way. And then when you veer off and you're like, wait a minute, I don't buy all this bullshit, and I have my own mind, and I'm going to speak it, then everybody's shocked. They're like, wait a minute, you can't do that.
It is true. People freak out. And sometimes people do it to try to save you too. They're like, you're going to end up in a dangerous spot. And they're like, I'm just trying to help you.
Right.
It's like, don't worry, I'm going to jump off that cliff, and it's going to be good.
And then I'm going to be the first lemur off that cliff, and everybody else is going to follow me.
And then they're going to be like biting their nails. And then after they like see you do it, they're like looking at the ledge, and they're like, that's maybe it's not as bad as I thought it was.
Maybe that water's not that deep.
Yeah, it's and it is interesting too, because people do more group think, because once you start getting enough people just like coming around checking out what you're doing, it's I've always found this fascinating with groups, because I even went to like I've done so many random things, but like I went to college not for an education, even though I was like, well, I'll get some education because I do like learning and things like that. But really the reason I went to college is because I was like dealing with like complicated like family background things that put me in things, and so it gave me a place to like live. So I was like a residence assistant,
Nice.
And then I also would like DJ, and that's how I like covered other bills. So I basically got to be paid to live where I lived, while also going and getting educated and studying at the same time, while also like so I studied human communications. And like it's such a thing, it's such a human thing that like if you start seeing a group form, it's going to like create its own personality, and it's you get a lot of people who will naturally want to try to figure out how to like manage the crowd, which can cause some weird things. But like especially depending on the kind of crowd you have, and you have a little more of like the hacker crowd, because I do too. And if someone says the wrong thing to me out in public, I have to like calm people down. I'm like, don't you do that. Don't you go knock on that person's door. Don't you go find them. Don't do it. Just don't.
Exactly. And it's funny too how groups take on their own personality. Like you said, like when I first started this podcast, it was just me and my roommate, and I was just going to talk to people and do a Q&A. That was my idea of doing a podcast. And it went from that to, 4-hour, 5-hour, 6-hour podcast, which was way too long. I think at one point, very early on, we had a podcast where we were like having some bourbon and just kind of hanging out and drinking. After about 5 hours, I think I literally went to my room and fell asleep and crashed, and nobody knew what was going on. They're like, where'd he go? But those were the early days. But what happens was, with just the idea of the podcast and just giving that one podcast, next thing you know, you have a community, and you have a Discord, and you have a website, and you have more people flowing in. And what I found is that when you try to control that, and when you try to put rules in place, when you try to put some kind of structure in place, that organic formation of that group absolutely fucking falls apart. Because it's not what it's for. It's a ball of energy, and you just gotta let it go, let it be natural, organic. Anytime you try to harness it, it's all fucked up.
It's so true, though.
Yeah, it is 100%. And I had to learn it the hard way. And so I stepped away from Discord, and I was like, you got this is your place. I'm not going to manage it. I'm not going to be the head cheese in charge or whatever. This is y'all's place. My place is up here. I got to go out and create and do this, that, and the other, which is good for me. But after I did that, that idea of the group of the Haunted Hacker ended up morphing into more of a global thing, where people are like, oh yeah, have you heard about this? Like, I've been to some conferences where someone will come up to me and say, hey man, I really love listening to your podcast. And it still shocks me, because I'm like, wait a minute, you actually listen to what I say? Like, do you know how dangerous that is?
That makes so much sense. Yeah. It's I still struggle with that one even now, because it's not even necessarily like imposter syndrome. It's just like one of my lawyers once upon a time said to me, because I was just like talking about it was like trademarking or so, I don't remember what the conversation was, and he was like, whatever it is that like you think or do, for us as ourselves as individuals, we'll see what we do for ourselves as common, because it's our world, and to us it is common. But the important thing to remember is that to everyone who's not us, it's not. And I think like I just keep remembering that every time I just like get into that. I'm like, oh, that's right. Okay, so it's like, and so I've just like kind of really come into this understanding that it's like, okay, so there's this world in my head that's like common to me,
right?
And it is interesting when you first start getting like a following and stuff like that, because it's funny. I relate to like when you're doing like your early day stuff and you don't have like any attention and stuff. It's like you're just like, oh, I was just gonna go do this thing, and in the beginning it's like you still want to, you're gonna keep doing it because you're like, oh, it's gonna grow someday. But then when it does start to grow, it almost feels like mentally we just stay in the beginning of when it all started, because it's like, well, I haven't changed, everything else around me is changing. I'm like, oh, there's all these people. These people are like, wow, that what you made is really cool. I'm like, oh,
yeah. Who are you?
20 people. And then it's almost doesn't feel real sometimes, but it is.
You hit the nail right on the head. Like, I look back now and I look at what I'm doing and things that I'm trying to promote. It's just like, how did this happen? Like, is this real? Am I going to wake up tomorrow and realize that I'm still like an analyst like 15 years ago? But it's cool though, because I think what it shows to people coming into the industry, or people who are interested in doing what we do, is that it is fucking possible.
Totally. Yeah.
And there's a lot of companies, a lot of people out there that will say, oh no, you don't want to do that, or you can't do that, it won't be successful. But it just depends on the person. If you're genuine, you tell the truth, you throw your shit out there, don't give a fuck what people say about it, guess what? People are going to listen. And I think that's what's cool about what you guys are doing, is that, I'm sure there's naysayers, but what's cool is seeing that you guys are going forward and this shit's working, and that you guys don't really care about what they're saying. That's not the focus. The focus is to make things easy on people and efficient and make money. Totally. And I think that's what we're all here for, really.
Yeah. I mean, people just want to like make enough money to like feed their family, have a good life, like go to a fun event, just like do some stuff, like not work 80-hour work weeks for absolutely no reason.
Right.
Like, I feel like, well, you work in cybersecurity, so like there's so many companies who just want to treat their like their malware team or their SOC, or I guess it doesn't really matter, like their threat researchers, just as if it's like a sweatshop. And I've even had like some who they'll treat that. I worked at the SOC and they would treat it like we're the zoo or something like that.
Right.
And the admin would be like, oh, we're just the SOC monkeys. We just throw shit at each other, and it's this life. But and it's such a thing. And they're like, look at these beautiful specimen here.
Right.
You see them working? Look at that one's typing right now.
Shit. Look at the pretty pew pew maps up on the screen. Yeah.
Oh yes. Like, oh, it's beautiful, isn't it?
Yes, yes. And it's so meaningful too. Like all the data is actually usable. Not really.
Right.
But yeah, the first SOC that I worked in, actually the second SOC that I worked in, was we had what we called the fishbowl. So it was the SOC was stadium seating, big screens in the front, and then in the back on the side there was a conference room that had windows. When you hit a button, those windows would go from being, opaque to transparent, and they could show the potential clients, and this is where the magic is done, or whatever. Really cool concept. I stayed in contact with one of my first bosses out of the military who developed that SOC, and I think that's another key point to really be successful in the industry and in life in general, is that I don't look at my bosses as bosses. I look at them as mentors. And every boss that I've had to date, that I still keep in contact with, it's because they were a true mentor. And I don't think there's enough people out there that are actually really mentors, although there are a ton of people on social media that claim to be mentors. But I think it takes a personal connection with those people in order to be a true mentor. And I've had, interns that I've learned stuff from. So when someone tells me, oh, I can't mentor anybody because I've only been in security for a couple of years, bullshit. Everybody has something to share. So
it's so true. Like, it's so spot on, because no matter who you are, and I think that's a good way to look at it too, because ultimately, like, if you're getting hired somewhere, like whoever anyone's boss is really trying to just like help everyone figure out whatever's going on. And there are bad bosses out there, but right. Even at like the worst company that I remember working at, my boss was maybe one of the best bosses I've had. And I stayed at I stayed way longer at that company than I should have stayed. I won't say which company, a bunch of companies I've been at. But like if it was 3 a.m. in the morning and I was like still working, he was probably working with me and being like, yes. Hey, how about you go to bed? I'll be up late, and then at least one of us will have, I know it's 3 a.m., but yeah, like 2 or 3 hours of sleep is better than nothing, right? Right. And I just remember, like, I hated that company. I hated the whoever ran the company at the top. But like, I really liked the people and like the direct team members and all that stuff. And I guess it's not that I necessarily hated that individual. I hated how they ran their company and how they treated their staff. And they like, that was definitely a sweatshop. But it is such a thing that, like, when you have a good boss, it's a permanent impact on who you become in the industry,
right? Or even who you become as an adult or a person.
That's true.
I think every interaction I have with individuals, whether it be short-term interaction or long-term interaction, somehow they influence a part of me that develops or changes based on our interaction. I learned something from everybody. And that's kind of the point of this podcast, is that I started to, first of all, leave a legacy behind for people who are coming into the industry and want to know what it was like when it first started, but also just to learn from people. I think it's a great way to really dive into people's backgrounds and learn something that I may not know, or share something that they may not know. So that's the way I look at it. So where do you see Cloud Underground going? What's the future?
So Cloud Underground, I guess I have I make like 50-year plans. It's part of like a really long, complex plan, I guess. If I try to I'm really bad about being brief about like really complex plans that I have. So I'll try to find I'm getting better at narrowing concepts, because I used to be really bad at this. So my dad was an entrepreneur, and pretty much like, even though like it was, he was the entrepreneur that just figured out how to like barely survive. But you learn from that, because even if we were like rather broke growing up and all that stuff, and like sometimes it's like to the streets it is, or like wondering how you're going to eat and stuff, you learn from that experience, and you pick up things. And the company that my dad started, it had its rough patches, but he stuck with it. And until it's now somewhere north, like over 40 years that it's been in business now, and it's growing, and it's now has a global presence and all this stuff. So I think like seeing that, it's a nonprofit though, which the challenge of that is no long-term money in a nonprofit, which is complicated. So I wanted to come up with a way to not be where you're kind of just like under the thumb of your backers, where like if you don't abide by their bidding, and try to, and one of the challenges with people who invest is sometimes they try to control your path and they don't know what makes it work. So I wanted to become someone who could sort of help, I guess, others find their path, but without trying to control them, and coming up with ways to be like, here's some things that you would normally need money for. But how about I just give you the asset and back away? Because when you put money into it and it's cash, people need cash for something. Why don't I just give them the thing and back away? Because if I give them the thing and back away, then I don't end up in that scenario that I grew up in. Because what happens is people start getting anxious about having to please you if you're like backing them in some way or providing for them in some way, and then they feel like they must abide by you. And I just don't work that way. So for me, I want to make Cloud Underground become a presence for people to sort of find their own paths and create their own of whatever it is. So even with the Underground Nexus, one of the reasons why, because I get asked the question all the time, because it's a very beastly solution to just be like, oh, it's free, have this thing. If people take it and iterate by 10% on it, it's no longer the Underground Nexus. It's actually something different, even from like a legal standpoint. I can't come after you even if I wanted to. I wanted that scenario though. And so what this means is I want to find the people who go and start making things of themselves and help them as a person first, and bring people together with the resources that we provide as an alternative to funding, to kind of get money less of the conversation. And instead of making money the conversation around like, let me give you funding, let money to be the certification. Go earn the money. Go earn some cash from your hands, your craft. I'll sit there with you while you're selling. And then when you're like, well, what am I supposed to be doing today? Did you still selling? Well, I'm tired of selling. You better get back to selling. Like, you know, I want people to learn how to break out. And I've seen enough people do it that I know that it's not for everyone necessarily, but I want to then like start finding ways to incubate partnerships with people as a way to like try to find ways to further reward people who are like building things up, and then continue to find more ways to like build more valuable assets that save people time and money, because I see time and money as the same thing. And one of the other things that I try to practice what I preach. So when people are like, well, how do you fund a lot of things? Sometimes if I know that I need a thing, I'm not going to ask for money. I'm going to ask for the thing. If I need $100,000 for a thing, don't give me $100,000. Give me the thing.
The thing. Yeah.
Yes. And then I also get people who are like, well, why aren't you just asking for money? It's like, no, I don't, because then I have to get labor. I have to build the thing. I have to go make this. That's more time out of my day. So that's more expensive than you just getting the thing, hand me the thing. Otherwise, now you gave me money. Now I have to move fast. Now I have to go pay some developers and hope they turn XYZ around. And then all of a sudden reliability of like turnarounds goes down. So for Cloud Underground, I really kind of see it being sort of like an incubator company where people come, where we're building I run something called the DevSecOps Dojo. That's part of Cloud Underground. And that's where we do most of like the building. So people come in, they sign up. And then we have a belt system that we just released a rework for that. And we kind of have people kind of work their way toward just like getting experience, just getting used to doing tasks that you probably should consider doing for like a job or a company instead of going to college or something like that. And then in the beginning, it's like training wheels where we just kind of make it like a self-paced job. Like if you were an entrepreneur and someone had just given you a budget to go buy these things, I'm not going to give you the budget to go buy the things, but here's the Underground Nexus. You just have the thing, take it, and then start just doing your build, start building your stuff. That's everything from there. You can do almost free, get a Raspberry Pi at least, and you can get to market. And so then wait till people work their way up to being like, okay, you are now at the point where you're ready to start being able to make money with this. And
Right.
at that junction, that's how they get like a belt rank that lets me know that they're ready to start trying to make money. And why don't we just make money the certification? So for me, it's like, make money, go make more money. Have you made money yet? Why are you getting, because then they're like, well, I want to get some certifications because I don't want to sound greedy or I don't want to make too much money. It's like, well, then you're never going to have money because everything costs money and time costs money. And if you spend a year looking for certs, you're just going to run out of it. And then you're going to end up bagging groceries at the grocery store because you're too broke. So
Right.
let's not do that. Let's just get right to it. Let's not waste time. Like, you have kids who are 4 years old and you're missing their glory days while you're sitting here thinking you need these certifications that you don't need. Let's get out of it. Let's live life a little more, because you can have more life and more money and work remotely. So, and so why did we target cloud also? I wanted to give people, cloud is one of the most like biggest, I guess, industries for like capital. You want to make money, you go work in like data science or cloud and get good at it. Even if you're really bad at it, 6 figures is considered low pay. So if you're making 100,000 or 120,000 doing like cloud engineering, cloud development, Facebook will now pay people upwards of like $800,000 for cloud development. And if we get into Microsoft, they're starting to offer $1 million contracts to people with cloud skills, because they want to keep people off the market and get that talent inside their own house. Because if they can either pay you $1 million and you'll make the same equivalent thing that you would raise $1 million to build for them and they own it, or you're going to probably raise $1 million without them and have $1 million and a product that's competing against them.
Right.
Just business. So why don't we just give people the stuff like forevermore is kind of how I see it. And kind of the other way is like, I'm heavily disabled, and like, I'm at a point in my life where even though I'm younger than most people who are like I can't really muster the like a work week like most people. I can probably hit about like on an average week, like 20 hours before like I start having weird anomalies and things like that. And so like other people, they have this luxury that they can work 80 hours if they felt like it. That actually doesn't exist for me. So it actually turned into part of my value proposition, is because I have to find ways that even if I can only work like 5 to 10 hours in a week, I have to feed my family. I have to make sure that like I'm taking care of more than just like my wife. I have like other folks who, like in my family. I have a pretty big family. My family's huge. I'll just be blunt about that. Like, there's a lot going on, and like other people have families too. Some folks got things going on that aren't your job. And like, I have to be able to make sure that people have like a roof over their heads. And now it's like I'm funding this like underground nexus thing and funding like multiple companies now. And if I have to worry about what I'm going to eat tomorrow, then that means I'm going to worry about how at least like 10 people at the minimum are going to eat tomorrow. And I can't do that. So just start making some money. That's all I want people to do.
Exactly. It reminds me of the true idea and the true motivation behind the development and birth of open source. To me, that's what is culminating within what you're doing, because basically you're creating something that might as well be open source, but you're giving it to somebody to further their career with. And to me, that's invaluable. And like you said, if you have to worry about how you're going to feed the family, or if you have to worry about how you're going to get to the doctor next week because you worked too much and made yourself sick, I mean, how much is that really worth? So you have to get to a point where things kind of autonomously run, and you have fingers everywhere to pull that in, right? So that's kind of what I do with I do like 3D printing, and I have a business on the side where I make random shit and sell it to people on the 3D printer. I'm always looking for that next side hustle, because that's the entrepreneurial spirit. And I'm just like, every time I create something and I make it a product and I sell it, it's like, it's exciting. It's like a magic trick, right? Because it's like, oh shit, it worked. Like, oh my God. And then when I look at the profit margins, it's phenomenal. And the reason why I picked 3D printing is because a spool of 3D printing filament costs $24, and I can create this magnificent, huge, complex object and sell it for $80. And
So
you
true.
know, and the margin is just profit margin is enormous. So I mean, those are the types of things that I look for, and I think that your mind is in the same place. Like, you know, let's see if we can create something that's going to be proficient, efficient, and not take 5 million people to create it, right?
Yes.
And that's the key point, because that is your profit margin. When you have to employ a lot of people to develop things, there goes your profit, and you're struggling and you have a very small income. But if you do it yourself and learn how to fabricate that to do it multiple times, I mean, it's like a cookie cutter, and it's it's like a golden cookie cutter. So I really respect what you guys are doing. Like I've looked into it, and you know, I've been around for a pretty long time. And when they were talking about the copy and paste idea and how it ran and how it worked, I was like, that's fucking phenomenal. You know, you've taken the idea of open source and developed something much, much more powerful. And it may take, you know, there's a lot of people out there that are entrepreneurs and inventors and just visionaries who come up with these things. And at the moment, people are doubtful. They don't think it'll work. You know, they don't want to touch it. But years down the road, people look back and go, man, that shit was pretty smart. So I try to encourage that. I try to encourage people to think on their own and really, you know, go off in directions that they want to go. Don't let what the industry dictates you should do be what you do. Go venture for yourself, experience shit, and fail. Please fail, because if you don't fail, you'll never learn. And that's one of the things that I had to do for myself, because I'm the type of person that I can watch somebody else do it all day long and I can watch them fail, but I'm the type of jackass that will go, they failed. I wonder if I'll fail too. And I'll just go after it. So,
it's
you know,
thing.
Yeah. And there's been failures, and, you know, I lend a lot of my successes, my big successes, to being a product of my biggest failures.
It's such a thing. Yeah. And it's good to outline that too. Because same here for me is like most things that I've done just like failed into the ground. It's just the thing.
Yeah. But just like with hacking, I think the word that I live by is persistence, right? So if I compromise a network, you know, you can get the keys of the kingdom, but where do you really get the most intel and the most information and most monetary value? Through persistence, right?
True.
So that's the same thing I carry over into business. Persistence. And I keep telling my analysts, and I tell people applying for jobs, persistence is key. You know, if you decide, oh, well, shit ain't working, I'm just going to give up. Well, okay, see ya. Because if you'd have been persistent 2 more days, it might have worked out.
It's so true. Yeah. It's what you just said is the one, because people ask me like, well, what should I be doing? What should I be doing? Almost the only thing that matters in the online world is that persistence. Also, because like people have to see persistence too, because you don't get trust without persistence. You don't get recognition without persistence. No one knows who you are without it. And it kind of reminds me, this reminds me of that quote, if I can remember what it is. But I saw it like on a YouTube video from like Casey Neistat. And ever since I saw it, I was like, that describes me. But he's like, the rational person adapts to the world around them, and the like irrational person expects the world to adapt to them.
Right.
And all progress though relies on the irrational person.
Right.
And so I tend to like, so I mean, for me, it's like I choose progress. So if that's what that means, then like, because there are other statements like that, like in a way, rationality is not the path to progress. Yes. And sometimes you have to go try something that sounds like it might be risky or sounds crazy. And if so many people aren't just like risk intolerant or just like averse or whatever, like they're just like completely intolerant of risk. They're like, risk, I can't do that.
Right.
And then like persistence, that's risky. And you have to have some audacity to be persistent with some things. Not only do you have to have some audacity, you sometimes do have to be completely irrational to be like, no, I'm putting my foot down on this. I'm making this. And then everyone's like, no, that's not sounds crazy. Well, we don't have time for that as well. I used to get all these people who'd be like, well, we don't have time for that. And then they'd propose all these things that take 8 to 9 to 10 to 20 times as long. And like, I come from a very like experienced background of like building like all kinds of scales of environments. Like I've built like environments that cost like over millions of dollars to like maintain. I've worked on like dark sites. I've worked on like infrastructure for like NASA security and things like that. Like Air Force, like worked on like satellite infrastructure. I mean, you go down all these long lists. Trust me, if I say something's going to take longer than something else, I've probably actually spent years dealing with it.
Right.
And it's people will be like, well, but this is going to be faster. And then what I'll usually do is I'll sometimes like cooperate and be like, oh, really now? And I'll just like be like, let's go. And then it's like taking them a while I'll just like open up a side project on purpose while we're doing this other thing that the longest, most painful way possible. And then with all of this excess workload, I'll be like, make this other thing that's a significantly more efficient version of it. And then I'll go and start like selling that thing so that they see it. No, I don't do that if it's like a partner that I like. It's usually like someone who I am like about to quit working with, so that I can just make sure that they know what I think about them. And then when I leave, then I'm like, this is why I was able to leave, because you didn't want to do something that made sense. And so I left because of that, because I prefer things that make sense.
And here's the end product, which is much better than the one you were creating. And guess what? I finished it a lot quicker.
Yeah. And then if they have a non-compete, I'll put it in a non-competing market or industry, because to me, it's not about competing with them. It's just, I just want to prove the principle that it's like, well, I'm just going to change the use case, change the industry, change all these things. And I just need you to see that what I'm talking about, you're going to learn something, and then I'll profit from it. And I don't know what's going to happen to your company, because I told you that there's this a better alternative, and I offered it to you first, and I'm going to stick with the thing that's more lucrative. I'm sorry.
100% of the time. And what's funny is you talked about, sometimes those type of people, those visionaries, are looked at as being irrational, right? So I look back at some of my role models from history, and I look at Einstein, and I look at Da Vinci, and some of the things that they created. And back during their time, especially Einstein, there was a good amount of people that thought he was just out of his fucking mind. And then you look at Da Vinci, who, fast forward to modern day, and you look at his sketches, and he developed the helicopter before there was flight.
Yeah, I looked at those. That's such a thing.
Yeah. So those are definitely my role models, and like this Nikolai Tesla, and the fight that he had with the FBI and the government about his inventions and his ideas. There's people scattered and peppered all throughout history that were visionaries and had their own dreams and concepts that came into fruition, but during the progression, they were persecuted, prosecuted, and called crazy.
Yeah.
But we read about them today in history books, because they made such a huge impact on modern day history. And I think we're going to see, probably not in my lifetime, in your lifetime, but fast forward, down the road, to when cars are flying. Totally. People will probably look back and say, you know what, those crazy guys back in the beginning of cybersecurity had a fucking real idea, like this thing actually worked, and nobody listened to them, but now we live by it. So I tend to stick to that belief, as well as, I came into this world alone. And when I look at the masses and people following, the masses and trying to conform to what's expected, I've never been that person. I've always been the person who looked at how things are running, and talked to a few people and kind of got an idea, and I said, okay, that's cool, but I don't want to be part of that crowd. I want to go on my own and figure shit out for myself. And of course, as a kid, that caused a hell of a lot of problems, and I got in a hell of a lot of trouble. But as an adult now, like, I've had that experience, and I know what it takes to be successful, and I know what happens if you don't put in that persistence. So with the podcast, that was one of the things that I struggled with early on when it started getting to be accepted and more, I guess, listened to or whatever, is I felt the pressure of should I conform and should I make it a podcast where it's clean and everybody, is happy go lucky and I follow the same mantras the podcaster before me? And it really put a lot of pressure on me. And at one point I wanted to quit and I was like, I don't want to do this anymore, because in my head, I felt like I was putting pressure on myself to be like something I wasn't.
Totally.
And I really had to take some time. I think I took like a month off at that point and sat down and said, you know what? This is my life. This is my head. These are my thoughts. They can tune in or tune out. I don't really care. But I'm going to do what makes me happy. And this is what makes me happy. And it's successful. So,
it's the right decision, I think.
Yeah.
So I think it's an awesome podcast.
I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it. To be honest with you, like up until recently, I really questioned if anybody even listened to the podcast. Like I would see the views or whatever on YouTube, and I'm just like, that could be bullshit, bait clicks, whatever.
Totally.
But then when I started seeing the stats from the streaming services like Spotify and stuff like that, and realized I was in 50 different countries, I was like,
oh, yeah.
What the fuck?
You're everywhere.
Like, why
can't be escaped?
Like, what is wrong with people? Why are you listening to me? But yeah, I mean, and that comes from the imposter syndrome too, which I think is really real. The one term, the buzzword that I want to talk about that I think is just absolute nonsense is skills gap. What I'm seeing in the industry right now, and I have been seeing for a while, is a lot of entry-level positions that are expecting people to be engineers. And
yes.
It's such bullshit. I'm like, where are you coming up with this? Like, I actually had a talk with somebody today. I interviewed somebody for a position. They ended up getting hired. But the story that they told me really shocked me. So they were telling me about a interview that they went on, and they mentioned during the interview, the executives, they said, we really need someone to help us rewrite this job rec to post online, because right now we don't have a lot of postings and we want to really refine this. Will you help us do that? Without being hired, this person, out of the kindness of their heart, said, sure, I'll help you do that. So they wrote the job description. The company posted it. When this person applied for it, they said, oh, no, I'm sorry. You don't have any, you don't have any on-the-job training.
People are ridiculous. I'm right here with you, because I'll tell you where this also makes me just curl is because I do build like businesses and I work with like different partners and things like that. And I've kind of gotten to a point where there's certain companies that I toss up certain red flags with like so fast that it's not even funny now. And I'll tell you what those red flags are, because it's the skills gap thing. If a company hires based on like qualifications, I don't believe that someone can be qualified for a job till they've already been there for like a year. And someone else told me that first, and I've been thinking about that since like 2015 or something. 100%. And the more I think about it, the more I believe that has to be true. And so it's like, okay, so what I started teaching then is, oh, well, follow this task that requires you to complete something from vendor docs. And then lo and behold, if people can do that, then I can assume that they can probably do just about any general technical job, unless they are quite literally going to be a principal engineer and have to have had like years managing large budgets with like scalable cloud infrastructure, something crazy.
Right.
But like, that's like, you only need one or two of those people in a company, like put them in your like VP or executive branch or something.
Right.
Everyone else, like, what are they doing? Configuring an API. And then the secret, let me tell everyone the secret that I hope everyone remembers, is that there are vendor docs. And what are vendor docs? The people who make the product, if a product is working, and I'm going to use Python as an example, if the product is working, it's probably because of the vendor docs from the creators are good enough for adoption to occur, which means that it's just a bunch of step 1, step 2, step 3. And then what that also means is that the vendor docs are almost always up to date as to where I see a lot of people, when I try to teach them things, they don't go to vendor docs first. They go straight to Google, because that also does technically make sense, but there's a faster path before Google. Vendor first. Go to the vendor, find a step-by-step from the vendor. There's probably like an ocean of them, and they're all, GitLab is such a good example of this.
Yes.
Like if you go to gitlab.com, if you cannot figure out something with GitLab from their vendor docs, then I will not hire you, or I will not work with you, not for anything technical ever, because it's just step one, step two. And
Right.
to this day, even people who I've met who've never touched a computer before, they can go and do things with GitLab.
Yes. It's like following a fucking recipe. It's not hard.
Yes. Like step one, click on this checkbox. Step two, look for this exact word.
Yeah.
And do this exact thing with this exact word. And I mean, it's like, okay, so do we need a degree for that?
No. You need to know how to read. That's basically it. I'm sure that we could teach some of these 3-year-olds that are working with iPads.
Yes.
Cruise through the iPad all day long. We could probably teach them how to develop a lot of shit just off the vendor docs.
Get kids like making things for each. Like I used to make things for kids on the playground. Like my first, I guess, business was making, like, Beanie Babies were happening, and I was in 3rd grade, and it was like the in thing. And I was like, what if I made my own Beanie Babies? And I asked my parents for some like beans and some cloth, and I sewed like little jellyfish.
Wow.
Out of like, I don't know, it was just bean bags with like yarn hanging from them, but kids would buy them for $5 on the playground. And then like in 5th grade, it was the first time I actually made a partner deal, because I asked my dad if I could copy the Zelda soundtrack, and he's like, well, that's technically not legal if I wanted to copy it and resell it. So he said, but you can get permission from the company. And so I called them, and I was like a little kid, and they're like, that's so cute, you're like a little kid. Yeah, we'll approve it. So that was the first time I got like my first business approval. And then I was like basically just recording. My dad had this like fancy cassette tape thing where you could take the CD and record it on a cassette tape. So I was giving kids like these Zelda cassette tapes for money. Nice. And I'd make like calculator program, but really it's like you can kind of just do stuff. You can just make things.
I was just about to say that. You know, a lot of people don't understand is all you have to have is an idea. You know, it's easy to take that idea and bring it to market. You know, I started off doing 3D printing last, I think, December. So it hasn't been too long. And I found an idea. I created this lantern. It cost me $4 to print. I'm selling them for $80. I made over $1,000 in 3 weeks. And it's like just little shit like that. You know, I remember in school, my first business was taking candy to school and selling it to the other kids, because in the lunchroom, they wouldn't sell candy. And everybody wants candy. So I would fill my pockets of my bag with candy, and kids would come up and say, hey, Jolly Ranchers, how much for Jolly Rancher? I, tell them 25 cents or whatever. So by the end of the day, I had a pocket full of money. I'd go home. My parents were like, what do you do? Where's this coming from?
Yeah. Then you can like go buy things. Cause it's like, hey, I made my own money.
Yeah.
You can't tell me what I can't buy.
Exactly. And even work, I still work for a company. I'm still employed full-time, 9-to-5 job, but I have so many things on the side that I do that really fulfill that part of me. Helping people, mentoring people. I do a lot with law enforcement over in the UK, mentoring former offenders for cybercrime, and I just enjoy it. I like having fingers in a lot of things because it provides variety and it keeps me from being super fucking bored. Because
I totally get that.
Yeah, burnout to me is only established when I start getting bored. And when I pile stuff on, yeah, it's a little taxing, but I don't get bored. But I do have to take those sabbaticals, like 3 or 4 days here and there where I just don't do shit because I'm working and my brain's going 24/7.
It happens.
Yeah, right.
I relate to that because it's interesting. Like I don't meet a lot of because I like keeping my day team because I keep a 9-to-5 too. Yeah. But I guess because even though I teach people how to like break free from like 9-to-5 lives and things like that, for me, I will say I like the routine of it and I like having the right people around. Yeah. Yeah.
So with the neurodiversity I have, structure and routine is super important. So that provides me, the 9-to-5 provides me that structure in my life to where the other parts of my life can be absolutely chaotic, but I can still go back to the structure.
That's the thing I need to, I fall apart without it. Like
Yeah.
I have to have like, okay, I wake up, this is like a thing that I have to check. And then I talk to these people almost
Yes.
every day. And
Yes.
if those people aren't around every day, I get depressed. And I'm super introverted. And I think part of it for me is like I have trouble wanting to socialize.
Yes.
And so if I don't have things to force me out of my bubble, I'll start getting like so isolated that I'll be like 4 or 5. Now I have like more family members around oftentimes. But if like family's out, especially on for whatever reason, for like a trip or something like that, like I have a strong tendency to just like vanish, and
Yeah.
like no one will know what happened to me. I'll just be in a dark corner, and that's that. So like the 9 to 5 for me is a little more of like I need to have like people I like, people I trust, and people who like know that I have some weird things going on in my head, who like are fine dealing with me. And then I'm like excited to be like, oh, check out this thing I made, because I love making random things. And so I guess I would be referred to as like a Renaissance employee who
Yes.
like I watch the whole company and then I like see what's going on. I'm like, that person needs this thing. Then I'll go like code it because I love AI. And I'm like, can I help this thing with AI? Can I help that thing with AI? And then they're like, okay, that's a good time. But I'm very specific about who I work with though. And I will go years without working with people if I don't like who I found to work with. But it's a thing. I guess what keeps you with your day team too, just like the routine, all that stuff too, the team.
It's the exact same thing. I work with 2 people who I consider family and my best friends, and one of them is my boss, and he's just like us. We have that 9 to 5, and we're dedicated and really love and passionate for our job, our 9 to 5. But he and I will be up until 2 o'clock in the morning, printing and texting each other, whatever, saying, "Hey, check this shit out." Hey, check out this new filament. We're always doing something new. And I think that's important is really being able to trust who you work with, and really knowing that you can be yourself and it's accepted. Because, growing up in the environment that I grew up in, I was expected to be a certain way and do certain things and act a certain way. And when I got older, it was like, fuck that. That's not who I am. I'm me. I don't have these rules programmed up here. Like I wasn't born with this rule set or your morals. I was born with my own. And I look at everybody else and I accumulate what they have and their beliefs and how they operate. And I pull what I like from each one of those individuals and I embed that in myself. I'm not one of those ones who will follow what everybody expects me to do. And yeah, it's caused issues in the past with family and relationships and schooling and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, those people are still doing what they're doing and are happy being drones. That's not me. Like I have to do my own shit. Yeah. And so like the introvert part that you spoke about is so me. When I moved back to the States last year from London, I moved to Chattanooga. I have an apartment in a really nice historical building, and I never leave. Everything I need is right here. I'm not a big fan of like running into random people on the street. Not my thing. And sometimes, what keeps me accountable and what keeps me social is I schedule these podcasts with people that I like, that I respect, that are interested in me. And I want that social interaction. I get to choose that social interaction if they choose to be on the show. And that
it's a good way to socialize.
Yeah. And to me, that keeps me in check. That makes me social. It makes me accountable. I have to show up. It forces me to be social because I've made a commitment and I never fail on my commitments. So yeah, I mean, it's just that's me in a nutshell is the introvert, and I get out when I want to, but there are times when I shut the light canceling curtains and I hermit, and that's
I get that.
I'm happy there. I'm happy there.
Like I definitely use the DevSecOps dojo to pull me out of my shell in a similar way. Of like, because I like coming on to things like podcasts like this too, because it's like I want to come talk to folks who I like talking to. But what helps me with the dojo is like I need to feel responsible for other
Yes.
people to motivate myself sometimes. And if there's no one else who I feel like is depending on me, there's certain things that even if I wish that I would accomplish it, I just won't. And so by having the dojo, there's always someone who needs something, which I want. And I think that folks who talk to me enough in there can tell. I do get so many messages now that it's kind of hard to keep up with everyone. But still, it's one of those things where it's like, why did I want to make it so that I have to monetize my members? Because I know that if they're going to make this commitment to what I'm saying that they're going to do, and I'm going to help them like make a living, I know what it's like to be broke in the past. I know what it's like to be like starting out and trying to figure out what the hell you're going to do. And you like go to investors and they all turn you down, or you go apply to jobs and they all tell you that you're just, or they ghost you or come up with who knows what. And you got bills to pay, you got life situations getting complicated, all of a sudden health stuff starts setting in, and you just
bro,
all just swoops in at once.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm experiencing that now. Like, so the only reason why I was allowed back to the United States was I was diagnosed with epilepsy.
Oh, sure.
In the UK, since it's socialized medicine, they frown upon people being indigent and not being citizens for socialized healthcare. So that kind of got me back into the States. The hospital communicated with the embassy and was able to squeeze me back in.
Makes sense.
But growing older, it's like at one point in my life, I wanted to be all of these things, and I wanted to be up here, and I want to do all this stuff. But I'm at a point in my life now where I'm happy doing what I'm doing. I'm happy, diving off into different things. But to me, it's not climbing that ladder anymore. It's not trying to be this acronym. It's more of just being happy and helping other people find what made me happy.
I love that. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. So I told the last guest, I was like, one of the main differences between me and a lot of people that I know is I don't gauge my success on what I've done. I gauge it on what other people have done that I've helped or mentored or helped them develop. Their success absolutely fulfills me, even though it's their success, because I helped them get to that point. And to me, there's a ton of fulfillment in that. And I think that's why another reason why I keep the 9 to 5 is because I can take these people coming into the industry, these young people, and watch them progress and encourage them.
That's very true. Yeah.
And just watching an intern go from an intern to, a SOC 1 or a SOC 2 or an engineer, to me, that is like so cool, because I interviewed this person and now look what they're doing. It is so cool. But yeah, I really enjoy watching success of other people. And I know in our industry, that's fucking rare, because
it's very true.
It seems like everybody's holding
big pants.
Everybody's holding the pitchfork going, fail.
Oh yeah. And then like you have these people who are like, well, you should be more like me, and then you can, and it's like
I'll pass on that.
There's like a club. So anyone who's like tried to get into cybersecurity as an industry, because like one of the reasons why I started doing a lot of the things, I'm like, well, if I can't get like funding from the like Kumbaya Club, like I can fund myself, because I think it's one of the things I will probably believe this forever. I think everyone at some point should learn something about how to actually just make money on their own, which is probably why the dojo's emphasized around that. And like, I see like in 10 years, I need the dojo to be running itself, where people are like teaching each other how to do that. And it's kind of like a similar kind of thing.
Right.
And it's if you have the ability to make money on your own, then when you do go work at a 9 to 5, it's still different though, because then it's like you're choosing to be there. And then also the people who you work with know that you're there not because they're like coercing you with money and gonna like try to lay you off or whatever. They like know that you actually want to be there, because you could just leave at any second if you really felt like it. And it's like, well, I mean, you've worked with like different kinds of contracts, And if someone's not treating you well, or just being disrespectful or causing problems in general, or just making things too stressful, it's like, just leave, and it's just not even worth it.
Yeah.
And then it's finding other people who are trying to get that for themselves, and they are trying to like make something. You're so right with, like, especially with this talent gap stuff. In a lot of ways, it's like the talent gap is the failure of, not in a lot of ways, I think in most of the ways, it's just the complete failure of like the hiring organization and how they want to run things. Like,
no, it's not related to it. That is the problem.
yeah, because it's if you have, there's more talent in the market that can do the work that people are claiming they can't find talent for.
Right.
And it's because they look for, well, you see it like in the dating world. People treat hiring like dating,
Yes.
where they're like, oh, I'm going to choose the person with the best jaw structure and the perfect hips and the ripped abs and what, you know, all those things. And then they like try to like make their relationship that they choose built around those things. And then they'll even choose like a partnership around stuff that they don't even have the same worldview. They don't even have the same idea of what respect should look like. And then they just like fight each other and don't know why they're fighting each other all the time. And it's like that. Hiring managers, they're like, okay, so if they have the ripped abs, maybe that's the CISSP. And then maybe they have like the perfect like jawline, and they always have like a collared shirt on. Maybe that's the security plus,
right?
And all those things or whatever. Then that is the perfect hire. And then they'll hire them. And I'll tell you what happens is a lot of those people are good at passing tests, and that is their skill.
Yes.
And then you end up with people who are good at passing tests, but not good at doing work. And then they say that the problem is that the talent's not out there when they're hiring test takers, not engineers.
Yes. So my mantra and kind of like my MO when I was younger was social engineering my way into a job. And before people freak out and like, oh, what are you talking about? Let me explain. So companies expect a certain look. They expect a certain level of professionals. They expect you to look a certain way, to talk a certain way, to spit the buzzwords out that they're looking for. So I studied that. And I'm not the type of person to wear a suit or a tie. And I would do that just because I knew that's what they were expecting me to do. And then I would go in and blow their mind because I actually knew what I was talking about. But, you know, as I got older, it's like one joy that I found through my success in my career is that I've gotten to a point where I don't have to go look for a job. People will contact me, and then I can choose where I want to go. But that only occurs when you prove yourself throughout your other jobs you've had. Mm-hmm. Like you can't have a shitty job history and expect at some point in your life someone's going to call you and say, "Hey, I got a job for you." That's not how shit works. You have to prove yourself first, put in the time and the effort, and then you can be completely individualistic and fly by the seat of your pants because they want you for you. And I think that's part of the hiring flaw that we have right now, especially with certifications, is when a company tells me that they have to have this certification in order to walk in the door. To me, that's identifying to me that they're not concerned about people. It's not a people company. And they will fire your ass, lay you off quicker than anybody else because Guess what? You're nothing but a certification because that's what it took to get in the door. And I think that's really sad because my platform lately, about the past year, was we need to start treating people, like humans, individuals, not numbers, not employees, not a developer, not a hacker. These are people with lives, right? And to assign a value to a person based on a certification, to me, it's just bullshit. You know, yeah, they may have the certification, but they may be a complete nightmare to be around or to communicate.
It's very true. Yeah. And it kind of goes back to what you said earlier too, because like, I feel like in a lot of ways, certifications play into the like, what do you call it? Like quick, like instant gratification culture.
Yes.
Because, you know, we're so used to like, oh, get this thing now, Amazon, they want you to buy it now, everything now.
Yeah.
And if you want to find someone who's going to make your business money, they have to have some form of persistence to stick through things that might be really hard to stomach for like 3 years or longer,
Yeah.
at least 1 year. Like, come on now. And certification, it's oftentimes, boot camps kill me.
Oh, that's a
Certifications
waste.
and boot camps, I have so much trouble. And I signed a paper saying that I wouldn't talk bad about boot camps, and I'm doing it. It's happening. It's happening now. Just don't sue me. So like,
Nobody listens to podcasts anyways. Don't worry about it.
perfect. We're good. They probably wouldn't trust this podcast on here. They're like, oh, that's one of those people. We can't support those people. So like certifications, you study for a season and then it's over. And if you hire someone who is there for a season and then it's over, I mean, there's a reason why a lot of times you see performance, and I'm a data scientist, so I watch, like, if you work in like, and you come with like analytics backgrounds and things like that, you see like worker activity go up for like maybe 3 months, and then you'll see a harsh like nosedive.
Yeah.
And it's like, that is the general pattern that you get with certifications, because it's like you're studying up, it's a lot real fast, done. And one of the things that then companies will do is they'll just have your job be to just go get more certifications sometimes if they don't know what else to do with you, because then they can go and use that as a marketing tool. Right. And so while people think that the certifications that their company is funding them to get is like because the company might believe in like them and that it's going to supposedly be good for them, well, really the company is just like, oh, well, we're just trying to like check some boxes for compliance, saying we have someone with this cert, we have someone at this cert, we have someone at this cert. And they're just going through making sure that they're checking off all the cert boxes. And every time they pay for that $1,000 certification for you, or that $150,000 SANS lesson for you, and all those different things, and I actually like SANS, they do some stuff that is a little more effective than others. But once they've paid for that, then all of a sudden they have a marketing tool. And that marketing tool of that certification is more valuable than your output as an employee. They make more money off of you having that cert than your actual work and your actual general value for companies who build their way that way. And then the certification is actually part of their financial bottom line and their economics for that to work. So boot camps, I think, are extra complicated because we all have to remember that human beings, the brain still works like a muscle. The brain has limited energy, limited capacity. And I don't know how many people have researched decision fatigue, but look up decision fatigue. You can go on, what's a good website for that? Plause1.org is a good website for like some of that deeper research. So if you go to like Plause1 and look in like scientific community research and you look up decision fatigue, you'll find out it's not just something that people make up in blogs. It's ongoing studies that people have done for years upon years upon years. And the way we could kind of illustrate this is that if you're a human being, then whoever you are, you have X amount of decisions that your brain can generally chew on before it starts to like decline in productivity or trying to figure something out. Right. If you continually push your brain to make more decisions than it's primed to be able to do, that amplifies the concept of burnout, so that and burnout is where you're then so decision fatigued that you actually are at a permanent hint. Yeah, it's just like a stall where your decision-making capacity is like gone. Yeah. And that's what burnout actually really comes from in a lot of ways. And it's physiological. You burn calories when you make decisions. People 100%. Might not know that.
Yeah, 100%. Like the brain itself is an organ. So it requires certain things to be able to function. And when you overload it and it can't get what it needs to keep going, absolutely. And I think a lot of the problems with hiring too, when you look back at fatigue and stuff like that, the problem that I'm seeing, the majority across the board, it's not really that we're overloading analysts or we're overloading people. The problem is that we're hiring from outside instead of promoting from within, because they can spend less money bringing someone from the outside in than giving somebody a pay raise and a promotion. And I'm totally against that. And I made a point to, when I started this new job, was to, first of all, look to promote from within. And then after I make those promotions, then I hire outside talent to not only amplify, but encourage that promotion. Because the knowledge that person that with experience coming in can share with the rest of the team that has been gradually promoted up is phenomenal. And then everybody starts, that incline continues. It doesn't go back down.
Totally.
Another thing that I found too with certifications is that, yeah, people will work really hard. They'll study really hard for the certification. Once they get it, some people tend to plateau, and that's it.
That.
And it's sad. It really is, because I'm the type of person, like, especially when we talk about fatigue and we talk about decision fatigue. One of the things that I learned early on, just troubleshooting and building shit and doing it on my own without having somebody instruct me, just learning how to do it myself, is that you'll hit that wall. And usually for me, it's late at night, and yeah, I'll program something and it just won't fucking work over and over and over again. And it boggles me because I can't figure out what it is that is failing. But when I take a break, I go to bed, wake up the next morning, guess what? The first manipulation I make, the shit works. Why? Because I wasn't making the right decisions. I was thinking I was making the right decision, but my brain was so tired. It was just like, fuck, I don't know, choose something. So I think that, with hiring, with job performance, stuff like that, it's an individual aspect, right? Totally. It's a human aspect. So
it's so human, yeah.
Yeah, we rely on certifications to hire or promote people. I mean, what are you promoting? Are you promoting a certification or the human? Because you really need to take a step back and look at that. And the industry right now is not so much people oriented. There's very few companies that I've seen, that I've talked to, that have a culture that supports individualism and supports, freedom of thought.
So true.
And it's a failure. It's a failure to the industry. And, when you get one company, when you get Gartner that says you need to do this.
Oh, yes.
Gartner. The whole industry does it, and everybody fails. So, I really try to buck the system and challenge it. Not that I want the system to fail, but I want to make it better. And the only way to make a system better is to challenge it. And so that's why I'm so vocal about certifications and what we're doing wrong in the industry, is because if you think I'm wrong, change the way you do things, see if it works. If it doesn't, I'm wrong. Great.
Yeah.
But it works for me. So,
I'm with you on all that.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like boot camp. It's like you're going to sit there and have people just like give you more information than you'll know what to do with. And then if you try to do other things on top of that, there goes the rest of your decisions. And then it's like companies, they want you to work like 80 hours a week doing development. Coding is decision heavy. And
dude, every line is a decision.
Oh my goodness. Like it's like, oh, do I want to use Nmap for the scan, or do I want to use BetterCap, or should I use Redair 2 maybe? No. Like it's like all these different options. It's like, well, should I use Ghidra? But if I use Ghidra, I can't do it in Fly. And it's like, what?
and then you talk about artificial intelligence and all the algorithms, like Bayes' algorithm that supports artificial intelligence. And you think about all those algorithms, and it's like, there's so many decisions to make and so many problems to solve.
Yeah.
It's a fun industry. Don't get me wrong. I love the industry that I'm in. I don't necessarily love everybody in it. I don't necessarily love all the practices that take place. And I really, I'll end this on this thought. When I pulled up LinkedIn the other day and I saw somebody posted and they were so happy about the way the community was working because they policed themselves.
No.
Please, if you're coming into the community and you're coming to cybersecurity, never do that shit. You're not a policeman. Your morals don't trump somebody else's. If you don't agree with somebody, let it be. Let them go. There's no reason to go publicly and trash somebody for something they did. Just let it go. So, yeah, this has been a great talk, dude. I usually have podcasts for about an hour, maybe a little shy of an hour. This one's gone an hour and 40 minutes, which I think is phenomenal. So I'd like to continue this conversation some other time on another episode. If you'd be willing to come back, I think it would be a great talk, especially talk about some AI and go that route too. Definitely. So I appreciate you coming on. It's been an honor having you here. Any last thoughts for the listeners or for anybody?
I mean, my main thought is just get out there and start doing something and give credit to your own ideas and just try something even if your idea might go south, because the best ideas start with letting something go south before you find the good ideas. So try it.
Yeah, and a lot of good ideas happen by accident.
Yes, definitely.
So with that, I'll close it out. It's been an honor and a pleasure, and I wish you the best of luck. And someday in the future, we should probably do some collaboration. I think that we would probably get along pretty well. So with that, I'll close it out, and we'll see you guys next weekend. Thanks.